All right. Hey, we're in, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am awesome. So, big day today. Going to start talking about something that, I don't know. Do you celebrate St. Patrick's Day in the Marquez household?
We do not. It's something the kids do stuff at school, so we get excited and make sure they wear green so they're not pinched at school and all those fun traditions.
Hate that.
Yeah.
Green pinching. Well, we do. In my family, we do. So, this is let me say the Pates never used to. It was just like whatever. I don't want to get pinched, right? But ever since we got married, my wife and her family, they're all from like upstate New York. Her mom's family, all of that, and for some reason, and I guess because there's a heavy Catholic, population there. They grew up. St. Patrick's Day was huge. So when we got married, Diana starts making the corned beef and cabbage, and like that's been a staple every single St. Patrick's Day. So when we're making this video, it's actually the day after St. Patrick's Day. But what we would like to do is, make sure that you know how to celebrate it or what it's all about for the year after. And it's still timely. It's still the day after. So let's pick it up. So you want to kick us off, Dr.
Yeah.
Marquez, with the prayer, and then we'll get going.
All right. Let's pray the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. So, what I find fascinating about St. Patrick's Day is we often celebrate this and never actually tell the story of who St. Patrick was, right? Like, how many times have you ever heard about St. Patrick in context of the holiday?
Very rarely. We have a Christian school with our church here, and so it probably more than most people because the kids like to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and so the teachers will bring in the story a little bit more. But I would venture to say most people think it's an excuse to imbibe a little too much and have a good time.
Yeah. I mean, really, for the most part, when we think of St. Patrick's Day, we think of leprechauns, we think of green, we think of corned beef, we think of a lot of people
Clovers.
just using it to just
Yeah.
get drunk out of their minds because, it's Irish, right? That's kind of the whole thing. So I think it's one of the reasons I wanted to do this was to really talk through what the real story is behind who this guy is. You dig into it, and the truth is there's not like I don't know, like I feel like when we deal with like Jewish holidays, Jews are very methodical in how you celebrate. So the foods this has to be this way, this is, you say these prayers, these things, you're looking up like, how do you celebrate St. Patrick's Day the right way? And I'm even looking at a Catholic site trying to say, like, how do you do this right? There's no, like, I don't know, like, there's not necessarily anything specific that's like, this is how it must be, these are the foods it must be. Like some of the things that they talk about, like, is teach your kids the way that St. Patrick's taught. So, use the shamrock to try to explain the Trinity, things like that. Give a history lesson. They say volunteer, but that's it. Like, I don't even have, like, what I was hoping I would find is you must cook it this way. You must make soda bread. Like, I didn't find anything like that. I don't know if you found anything like that. Like, these are the musts
Well, and I
of
think
St. Patrick's Day feast.
I think St. Patrick, especially if you look at the Catholic calendar, he's one of many that you celebrate different days of the year, and so you have multiple feasts depending on what saints are given which day. And so since there's so many, I mean, really, if you pulled the entire global calendar into play, you would have someone every day of the year that you're remembering and celebrating. And so because of that, I think that St. Pat, they're not so specific because they would have to have that for everybody.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually, now that you say it that way.
Yeah, and I think also generally what you see is that certain people are highlighted depending on what country you're in. So if you were in Ireland, you're probably going to celebrate St. Patrick, where in America, it gains a lot of popularity largely because of the Irish immigrants that came to America, and they kind of brought Irish Catholicism with them. And as they celebrated St. Patrick in Ireland, they continued to celebrate him here. And unfortunately, it has spread, not always in a positive way, in terms of just Irish culture, but less focused on the missionary efforts of this great man and more focused on maybe over-the-top partying, which
feels like that happens to most holidays, though, especially in America. We turn them from what they were meant to be to like just a good time to party. They lose all meaning.
Well, I also think one of the interesting things with Patrick is you'll find, because we did this discussion, it's always in the middle of Lent for the most part. I think it actually always is in Lent. Maybe there's some exclusions to that, but it's a feast day in Lent, which you're allowed to bend some of those rules in Lent on church recognized feast days. And so that almost enhances the desire to really party hard because you're traditionally in a season of abstinence or fasting. And so I think that might be why St. Patrick's Day is maybe overly celebrated or has become that, because it was exciting to have a break in the Lenten season. So
get some beef, some meat during that time.
And yeah, why meat, right? Because you're not supposed to eat meat necessarily. You might just give it up on Fridays, but in general, you can see some of the things that we do celebrate on St. Patrick's Day may be related to a break in that Lenten abstinence.
That is another thing like I've totally forgot about with that. Was just its placement in the calendar of it's a break if you celebrate it the way it was meant to be. It's interesting too as you look into it, because I wanted to do some corned beef, because it's just a standard thing. So like at our house, corned beef, cabbage, the whole thing. Soda bread is a big deal. And so we're looking at the whole corned beef thing. You try to see where that started from. And if you look at the history of like corned beef and like that's not even an Irish thing. It was like the Brits enjoyed corned beef. It was too expensive for really the Irish people. And it wasn't until they come to America, and it was, I think, interactions with Jewish butchers in Delhi that they liked the way it was done. And so that just kind of got, brought in and kind of into the holiday, into the festival. But that's not like an overtly Irish dish originally anyways. As if you look at even just doing a corned beef, which by the way, I didn't make it corned beef. I smoked it as a brisket, and that was excellent. So there you go.
You're so good. You're always on top of the food stuff, man.
Well, hey man, that's my world. You're on top of like things that matter, like history and all of that. And I know how like where a brisket came.
It's good.
So, but it is tasty. What can I say?
That's awesome.
It's a good look for you. We're there. So start talking.
All right. Well, so I think we were talking, I was going to segue in. Basically, you said the Britons were the ones using corned beef. And I think that that's appropriate because St. Patrick, where did he come from, Dr. Pate?
Came from England, man. Well, Britain, right? That's the important piece. So can I say this, though? I used to think that this holiday really was pointless for me as a Protestant. And that's just ignorance, really, of what it is. But let me tell you two things that I think have kind of changed that for me. Is not only do I like it because it's just another time to celebrate with the family and to talk, but it's the story, right? It's the story of who he was. And so, yeah, you bring that and you teed it up, right? Of who is he? And there's two books that I've looked at just for fun that we've had and, that I would recommend if you want some reading. So first off, this is a great one, 131 Christians Everyone Should Know. It's kind of a standard. They had a little snippet in there. It's fun if you want to teach your family, who some of these Christians were. It's a great one. But if you talk about like missions movements too, this is a classic, right? So from Jerusalem to Irian Jaya. And so that's a classic one. So there's stuff on Patrick that you see is born 389. And in his teens, they lived on a kind of a West Coast town in England. And what had happened was, though, a group of Irish plunderers came in, and they were young guys too that came, and they carried off a bunch of the young boys there and turned them into slaves and sold them throughout Ireland, right? So then Patrick, as a teenage boy, who his parents were Christian, there's a heritage there, but he was not really a believer, spends the next 6 years in slavery in Ireland on a pig farm, and really just a nominal Christian at the time. But in his slavery, begins to like have a lot of conversations with God about what's going on. He ends up getting saved while he's this slave on a pig farm, right? And then at some point, what does he do? But he runs away, he flees, he gets on a ship, makes it to Europe, and then finds his way back into England and is restored with his family. Now, that's not how the story ends. This is where it gets really interesting. Is as he's with his family, he has what he described as something like a Macedonian call back to Ireland, back to become a missionary to Ireland. And so he had studied to become a deacon and to go. Which, by the way, clarify, do you know, like when you're getting into Catholic terminology, use of deacon or how they would have understood the office of deacon versus a Baptist way? Do you know what the difference would be?
Yeah, but some of it's unclear as to how developed it was in the 4th century. But usually the deacon position for most of the Catholic tradition is that it is an ordained position moving into the priesthood.
Okay.
And so you have lower classes, even, those the lectors, those that read, those that even have the keys to the church. There's a whole line that Trent lays out that there's these other offices. But deacons are ordained, and that allows them to hold the instruments related to the Lord's Supper, which nobody else at that time was able to do. So if you became a deacon, it was likely you were on track to become a priest.
Got it.
But not necessarily at this point, because I think it says his grandfather maybe was a priest.
Yeah.
Which brings into question in my mind the celibacy requirement, because
this time when you were back at that time, they still did not have, and he was Celtic background as well. So Celtic Christian, clergy were married at least during the 4th century of what you're seeing there. So his family were in all of that. So he has this call. He begins to train to try to go and to be a deacon, to go to Ireland. Is passed up the first time. The guy who goes ahead of him dies within the first year, and then Patrick's next in line to go. So Patrick heads there when he's about 43. As a single guy, heads to Ireland. And what you find there is there were Christians, small, tiny pockets of them, but for the most part, this is the quote from the book. It says that while there were isolated enclaves of Christians, the vast majority were still entrenched in paganism. They worshiped the sun, the moon, wind, water, fire, rocks, and all believed in good and evil spirits, kinds inhabiting trees and hills. Magic and sacrifice, including human sacrifice, were part of the religious rites performed by the Druids or the priests. And so that's the world that he steps into. And a lot of they talk about too is the terminology that they use is like power encounters, where he would test and like put these Druid guys to the test of who's more powerful, the magic of the pagans or the God of the Bible, right? And so a lot of that stuff was happening. He was really good at how to meet and know the right people, because remember, he spent 6 years in, essentially in Ireland in slavery, knowing these kind of people. These were his people that he wanted to go back to, but ended up gaining a lot of influence, especially with one of the kings there, and is able to. And then the king's brother gets saved and begins to plant a church, and then from there uses that to kind of go throughout all of Ireland. And so you do see that, like, his efforts are really what spread Christianity through all of Ireland. And so that's what's really fascinating about that story, right? Is this is what he did, right? Is he made it a focus to go back to the people who had enslaved him, and to because his burden was for them. And Ireland's never been the same as a result. Now, look, Ireland's split now, and you've still got the Catholic versus Protestant fight there, but this is prior to all of that, right?
Right.
There's no such thing as that in the 400 AD time frame. So really a fascinating story. There's a lot of myth though, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you and I find is there's a lot of myth about him that you've got to separate. Like, that's the gist of the story. Everything else, you got to kind of filter out.
Right. And some of that's plenty, that's the key. And I think what's cool is that he was such a hero, that for hundreds of years after his death, they kept extending his legend because the regard for somebody who would give all up for the sake of the gospel was just capturing the imagination of Christians everywhere. And, in the 4th century, Rome had extended the empire to Britain, but they never had gotten to Ireland. Ireland's waters are a little bit more treacherous, and so he is leaving the boundaries of the Roman Empire, going into a very dangerous place, but he's uniquely equipped through his slavery to know the language, which is a huge deal. He's able to go in there and speak and understand the customs. It reminded me a little bit of Elijah and the prophets of Baal. Let's just flat out test your gods versus my God, and having that confidence. And then working through the hierarchy. I think this is something that maybe as Baptists we're not always as keen on, but in a culture at that time, if you convert a king, the chances are Christianity's got a strong foothold now to be propagated to the entire kingdom. And so it is kind of a cool thing to see. And so, missionary strategies, how do we interact with the government? How do we have the freedom to get in with the gospel? And so, I think it's really cool to see this guy who did such a thing and died probably, with no holiday in his name, but over time it becomes a bigger and bigger deal.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's the question too about his canonization of why did they canonize him? And I think that the speculation is he's canonized as a way to try to bring the Celtic church under the Catholic umbrella, right? That you got their guy that will take, and that's a whole nother story too, another time. And I'd love to get a buddy who is a church history guy to come in and talk about it. Maybe even the differences between, of some of the flavor of Celtic Christianity, of what that was like and what was it all about, because it is distinct. And prior to when it kind of becomes and just kind of merges in, it becomes what you'll see today, which is you're either Catholic or Protestant. Which, by the way, and I don't know if we talked about this, when you do St. Patrick's Day, you either going to celebrate it wearing green or you're going to celebrate it wearing orange. Mm-hmm. And the Protestants wear orange. The Catholics, so we all, there are places they do that in America, but for the most part, we all go green. But orange is what we should be doing.
I also learned that in prepping for this. So that is pretty cool.
There you go. So we didn't wear orange. Orange isn't going to get me a free donut at the Krispy Kreme, though.
Well,
that's the sad thing.
I wore green for the show. I thought you would wear orange, and but that's probably confusing.
No. Wearing brown.
Yeah.
It's the merge of orange and green.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, but in all that to say is there's not a ton there. So if you want to go and look more into it, it's a fascinating story, but I think it's one that's worth telling. And I do think this is an area that one of the reasons why I like talking about St. Patrick's Day is there are some holidays that we celebrate that are from the Bible that are important. It's the ones that I want to keep talking to you guys about, sharing with you of like certain ones that are on the biblical, that are in the Bible that we kind of want to share, and we want to use those to remind us about the great acts of God. But I do think there's certain holidays too that remind us about great acts God worked through his people, through his church. And I think the story of Patrick's a fascinating one. And I think we should use it to use it as another time to tell a story about the missionary efforts of a man and teach it to our family. I think it also tells you something about the sovereignty of God. To hear this incredibly terrible story about what happens to him being kidnapped, and then watch what God does as a result of all of that too. So what do you think, man?
Yeah, I'm hoping I've got enough bandwidth to pull this off. My connection's just not good here.
Him?
But
I think we lost him. As you can, we're almost done, man. Bring it home.
Can you hear me? Are we back? All right. Yeah, I think a cool idea is the idea that he drove the snakes out of Ireland. That's one of those myths. We basically believe today that there never were any snakes on Ireland. But a lot of people would argue that that might be a metaphor for him driving out paganism and the heresy, or maybe Pelagianism, because that's the same ballpark. And so I think that that's another, can we celebrate that he drove the snakes out? Absolutely. The demon hold on Ireland is broken by the missionary. And what's more Baptist than that? Should we celebrate St. Patrick? Absolutely we should, because we are a missionary denomination. We go and we send and we support our missionaries. And St. Patrick is really a great character, a great missionary who did what we would aspire to do. Many of our churchmen have done. And I think it's important. Missionary work is still happening today. Let's celebrate the great missionaries of the past. And we're not going to end this with a prayer to St. Patrick, but I did have a prayer of St. Patrick that I thought would be fun. I still think we should close with our standard stuff, but I just wanted people may have heard this. This is called St. Patrick's Breastplate. And whether it's really his or not, I'm not sure, but it says, Christ be with me, Christ within me, Christ behind me, Christ before me, Christ beside me, Christ to win me, Christ to comfort me and restore me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ in quiet, Christ in danger, Christ in hearts of all that love me, Christ in the mouth of a friend or a stranger. And so again, all about Christ, bringing him to the lost and going to his slave masters to bring them the gospel. I mean, it's just a fabulous story and worthy of celebration.
Hey man, good stuff. Way to finish that up. I hope this helps y'all. Next year, make the corned beef cabbage. Make it a good time. Share the story. Read the little biography and talk about the great missionary efforts of Patrick. All right. Until then, may the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look with favor on you and give you peace. God bless you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. And we'll talk to you later on.
Take care. God bless.